So now the two of us are mostly feeling better. I think it's about time that we start looking to head south to make it to Curacao so that we can fly out for the wedding we have later this summer, as well as Iceland and France, which are all super exciting, but we've got to make it down there so we can actually make those flights. So the first thing we're going to do is start looking at the beautiful weather map that tells us when we can go and when it makes sense to actually leave. So we are this little green dot down here, and we need to make it southeast. Now I wanted to show on this map that there is this big orange L right now, and that big orange L is an indication of a low, which, according to the weather forecasters, has a % chance of actually forming into a named storm. So when you see, Hurricane Ian or any of these other named storms, that's what we're talking about. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be a hurricane. It could just be a tropical storm, but we're starting to get into that time of year, right? It's already late May. We are starting to get into June, which begins hurricane season around there. So things like this are going to happen more often, and we definitely don't want to be in the part of the Caribbean that can be affected by hurricanes while we're on turtle. So it's time for us to start looking at these and start looking at more of our path heading south. So where we are right now is up here, this little green dot. Our plan is to make it here to either the east end of the Dominican Republic or the west end of Puerto Rico, and then make our way all the way south down here to Curacao. So this is roughly a 3-day trip if we get a good window, and this is roughly a 5-day trip, so we have roughly 8 days of travel that we have to get done within the next month or so. So the tricky bit is really, how do we get from here to here with the wind as the way it is? So you can see right now, this blue indicates that it's a little bit dead, and the green is the wind and the direction the wind is moving in. So ideally what we actually want for this trip is mostly going to be wind that's not coming from this way, or just dead. So actually right now you can see it wouldn't be bad to leave at this very moment. But later in the week, that basically stays dead for another day or two, and then the wind picks back up, until we're back to the regular pattern of the wind being kind of directly in our face, which is not great. So we think there might be a window next week. If we look out over here, we can see that we start getting a little bit more of dead wind again in this area, and we're hoping that by the time next week rolls around, it'll maybe expand, or hopefully the wind actually comes from any direction but east or southeast, so that we can actually go directly southeast and actually sail most of it, which would be excellent. So once we make it to DR or PR, the trip then is really from here to here. What we have on the screen right now is pretty much ideally what we're looking for. This is something like 10 to 15 knots heading eastward. So while that's happening, we can basically sail on a beam reach all the way down to Curacao. So that's what we're hoping for, that we kind of want to look for a window where we're going to make it to our next destination, where a day or two later this happens. Ideally, that'd be nice. We might have to wait a couple more days, but if that's the case, then really it's just another 5 days at sea, and we're in our final destination for the next few months anyway. So while we're looking at this, we're also thinking about where we're going to be in a month and a half. Is it a month and a half? 2 months? 2 months. In about 2 months, we'll be in Iceland. So we're curious, okay, what does it actually look like in Iceland right now? So we're all the way down here in Turks and Caicos, and if we go northeast quite a bit, keep on going, that's past Canada, we get all the way up here, and you'll see things get very red and scary looking, and that is Iceland right now. So right now they have sustained 41 knots of speed. There are high seas warnings on all sides of them, and a low of at least 8 knots circling around out there. We actually looked at another map of Iceland for what conditions is it right now, and they basically said don't go near the ocean because you might just get wiped away by it. So hopefully this all calms down before we get there in 2 months and it's not 0 degrees and blowing 40 knots.
Oh yeah. Well, we finally may have some weather windows, but the ones we wanted are not possible. So that means, unfortunately, that all of our costs are going up a little bit more. We're paying a few more days to stay in the marina, and we are paying for the rental car some more, because without the car, we're just kind of stuck in the marina, not enjoying the island. And the last and probably the most annoying thing is to extend our stay here. So Turtle has her own paperwork we need to do to extend our time with her being here with customs, and we have to do our own paperwork with immigration. So we're going to go see what that kind of experience is like in a brand new country. First up is Customs Immigration. So we do an application, we get in there, and we get this process started. Okay, so they took the applications, and now we go over, so walk with me. So we go over to the receipt place, and we get a receipt, and then we take that over to Treasury, which is actually like a 5-10 minute drive that direction, so got a lot to do. It's like 3:30, so I really hope we get this done before 5 o'clock. Okay, and then we drive over to the Treasury and pay the receipt that we picked up at the Treasury, and then we go to the next step. So let's go. Oh, and the line looks like it comes out of the building outside, and there's a ton of people, so we don't want to shove cameras in those, so we're not gonna take the cameras in there, but that looks like a very long line. Oh, Treasury paid. That wasn't bad, half an hour. But now we take both of these receipts that we paid, and we go back to Customs. Hi.
To immigration.
To immigration, yes. Oh, okay. All done. Big lesson to be learned. So when we started cruising, everyone told us make sure you have copies of everything, and we always did. We have like 20 to way too many copies of passports and Coast Guard registration and everything. So when we went into the office and she said, I need copies of your passport and we can't make them because we're out of ink in our copier, we were like immediately like, no, we got this. We are so prepared for the unexpected. And she said, I also need a copy of your cruising permit, which they gave the original cruising permit we got at the marina. And we don't have a copy of that because we just kept the original safe. And I had to run around building to building to building trying to find a copy machine that had ink in it. Multiple offices were out of ink. So lesson learned is any important document, especially even if it's a newer document we get on the island, we make copies of it and we keep it on us. But otherwise, with 10 minutes, it's 10 to 5. With 10 minutes to go, it was done. Now, I mean, overall process was what, like an hour and a half for each side. So 3 hours total. Not bad. And now we get to legally stay in this country for longer. So I think this calls for some ice cream. Ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream.
The promised ice cream. So now that we're finally legally here, we have a few days at least to continue to explore the island, maybe weeks. We kind of gave them a long window, and they were happy to give it to us, so that was great. So we're going to continue diving, exploring the island, and because of the way the weather's worked out, we're actually going to have time to, well, we're going to run into our 10-year anniversary here on the island, which is great. We actually thought we might be on passage for that, so we'd have to celebrate before or after, but now we have the opportunity to really find a nice place for dinner and really just kind of go all out on an anniversary 10-year celebration.
We have been in Turks and Caicos probably a little longer than we originally expected. We thought we would hit maybe 1 or 2 Caribbean islands before we headed down to Curacao, but staying here longer also means that we can actually get some scuba diving done, which is a big part of what we like to do. So we actually got all of our own equipment, and believe it or not, so this is our BCD, so it's the buoyancy control device that we use to scuba dive basically, and our fins and a mask. This whole thing, we used to travel overseas with this in a backpack with all of our clothes we needed for 2 weeks, and we used to go on scuba diving vacations. So can you imagine all of this fit into an Osprey bag? We were light packers. But yes, it's come in very handy on the boat because they don't take up a whole lot of space. And we've got our little wet head that we've shown you before that has all of our diving equipment, and we let that area to dry whenever we need to. So today's a refresher course. So we haven't been diving in over 2 years. But both of us have tons and tons of diving under us, so it's always good to get a nice little refresher course in a nice pool before we jump into the ocean in a few days. So very excited about that, and it'll be nice to make sure that all of our equipment is still in tip-top shape. It's good. There's no air though, so that was hard.
There's a lot of sawdust on it, actually.
Oh, and sawdust. Sawdust is edible, right? Yeah. Today is our 10-year anniversary. I don't think there's a better way we can think of spending it than going on a dive. But setting up this camera is always a feat. But it's completely worth it because it takes some really amazing shots. We actually have a window coming up too, so I think that was a nice little anniversary gift that we got. But all that aside, for tomorrow, prep tomorrow, clean tomorrow, everything tomorrow. Today, we dive. If I can get this camera done. Okay. Alright.
Head underwater, falling back into you. I thought we'd be smarter, I got nothing left to lose. You said you fall with me, no matter how far it goes. Down deep and under, we're stuck in this pattern, but I need you close. All I ever wanted was for you to prove me wrong. You're changing our colors again and again. I could never let you go. Something about you feels so different, makes me wanna risk it. Every time I look at you, you pull me back into your river. Swim a little deeper, I don't need to breathe with my head underwater. I don't know the reasons, I'm not sure I really care. We're all of our demons, and they never disappear. I will forgive you if you've forgiven me. We're stuck in this pattern, but I need you close. All I ever wanted was for you to prove me wrong. You're changing our colors again and again. I could never let you go. Something about you feels so different, makes me wanna risk it. Every time I look at you, you pull me back into your river. Swim a little deeper, I don't need to breathe with my head underwater. I know it's not easy, I know we could dive in slow. We're not like the others, they do not need to know. You said you fall with me, no matter how deep it goes. With my head underwater.
A big thank you to our Patreons, Chris and Justin Fink.